being with us this morning. We have a couple of issues. The first is we're going to ask the leader, the Republican leader of our House Admin Committee, Mr. Davis, to talk about H.R. 1. The bottom line about H.R. 1 is Republicans understand that the constitutional protections on freedom of speech are crucially important and have to be defended and protected. We believe that everybody's speech ought to be protected, particularly political speech, and the extent to which you've now got a situation where the Democrats are trying to massively expand government control over what people are able to say and do in political campaigns, and they're trying to impose a partisan FEC breakdown on what Americans can say is yet the latest example of this Democratic majority trying to impose government rules, government regulations, take power away from the people they claim to be representing and give it to the government. And so we're going to have Mr. Davis talk a little bit about exactly what the Democrats are proposing and why we're going to be opposing that. The other issue that we really want to address this morning is Representative Ilhan Omar. And Speaker Pelosi has become very fond over the course of the time that she has now been Speaker of talking about immorality and talking about things being immoral. And I can tell you that what is truly immoral is a situation in which she pretended to condemn the anti-Semitism in the comments of Representative Omar, and then has now turned around and has appeared with her, embracing her on a magazine cover, and tweeting out a statement saying, and this is a quote, that Representative Omar embodies millions of dreams of women and girls across America, end quote. That is absolutely not true. Representative Omar embodies a vile, hate-filled, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel bigotry. This is not a time for politics. This is a time for the Democratic leaders in this institution to do the right thing. They should remove her from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. They should stand up to her. They should stop empowering her disgusting hatred before it turns into horror. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to our whip, Mr. Scalise.
Thank you. And I echo the comments of our conference chair, Liz Cheney, in stating that if you truly do believe that the statements that Omar has made are anti-Semitic, which they are, and if you call on her to apologize, which she hasn't done unequivocally, even in her apology, she continued to attack organizations like AIPAC, and she continues to make these kind of statements. You're condoning that kind of attitude if you don't remove her from the Foreign Affairs Committee. Everybody's free to have their own opinions. We all ought to stand up to bigotry where we see it. But when you choose to put a member of Congress on a committee like the Foreign Affairs Committee, it means that you share their values and how they're going to represent your conference. When we put somebody on a committee, we have those same kind of discussions. Is this person going to represent the Republican Party's views on that committee on those issues? And if you look at Congresswoman Omar's statements, she will not back away from them. When she continues to talk about things like questioning the patriotism of somebody who, or whether or not somebody can support Israel in the strong bond between America and Israel. It's a bipartisan bond. It's a nonpartisan bond. And to not fully understand that, maybe she ought to talk a lot more to people that have a deeper history of the development of the nation of Israel as a Jewish state and why it's so important for America to continue to stand with our allies like Israel and to go after members who believe in that relationship. Shows that she has a lack of understanding for those basic principles. And it's time that Nancy Pelosi stand up to Congresswoman Omar and remove her from the Foreign Affairs Committee. And now I'll bring up our leader of the House Administration Committee, Rodney Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Whip, and also thanks to our entire leadership team for helping to really lay out why H.R. 1 is a very bad bill, not just for Republicans, not just for Democrats, but for all Americans. The greatest threat to any election system is actually partisanship. The Democrats came in to take control of the House of Representatives, and they promised a new open and transparent process. But they failed miserably with their signature piece of legislation, H.R. 1. This is a bill that has grown from 571 pages to 622 pages overnight. And it was a bill that has committees of jurisdiction having oversight over many of the provisions that number 10. But there's only been one committee, the smallest committee in Congress, the House Administration Committee, that's marked it up. We 3 Republicans on a 9-member committee spent 5 hours with our Democratic colleagues last week marking this bill up, offering 28 amendments that we believe would improve the bill. Every single one of those amendments, like outlawing ballot harvesting that we've seen lead to a new special election in North Carolina, those amendments were wiped away on a partisan roll call vote each and every time. So the promise of Democrats for more openness, more transparency, and more bipartisanship has failed miserably already. And now we have this bill that's being forced to the floor. Other committees of jurisdiction don't have the ability to mark this bill up. They don't have the ability to debate this bill. And I certainly hope over the next few days when we're debating it on the floor that many of the provisions in this bill come to light. H.R. 1 takes power away from states to administer their own elections, misuses taxpayer dollars, and threatens to limit Americans' constitutional rights. We want every single person who is registered to vote, who has the ability to vote, to be able to cast that vote and to have that vote protected. And we feel that H.R. 1 does not do that, even though the Democrats feel like it is. And this has been their number one signature legislation. H.R. 1 is usually reserved for the most important issue that we're going to face in Congress. Our H.R. 1 last Congress was our tax cut bill. When the Republicans took over in 1995, H.R. 1 was the Congressional Accountability Act. It was an act to make Congress work better and be more accountable to the taxpayers. Clearly, H.R. 1 does not do that this time and in this Congress. Though my Democratic colleagues have changed the program that they first introduced, they are still putting government dollars into congressional campaigns through their 6-to-1 match program. This is probably the most egregious provision in this bill. No one, and I mean no one, is saying that we need to put more money into politics. And a vote for this bill is a vote to put government money into our own congressional campaigns. That's not what my constituents say they want. That's not what the taxpayers of this country say they want. And regardless of how they're trying to hide the way they do it by creating a new mandatory program to do so, in the end, the taxpayers will be the ones footing the bill, and the politicians, the members of Congress who will actually get more money in their campaigns from the taxpayers are the ones who are going to benefit. So with that, I don't disagree with all of the ideas in H.R. 1, but that's all they are. They're good intentions with unintended consequences. And election reform should be bipartisan and not serving the interests of politicians, or in this case, members of Congress and those running for Congress. And I'll leave you with this. This issue is so important. And we have to remember that it's Republicans and Democrats that agree that every American's vote should be counted and protected. Thank you.
I want to thank Congressman Rodney Davis for his work. A lot of committees had jurisdiction over this, but the Democrats chose not to run the bill through them. Roughly 40% of this bill has not been marked up in a committee. Zoe Lofgren, your chairwoman, promised that it would be marked up in the other committees. Soon we found out that was not the case. The Democrats, the majority party, is able to select what's their most important bill that defines their Congress. So they picked H.R. 1. They call it For the People's Act, but after listening to Rodney and a couple more points I'd like to bring out, I truly believe it's For the Politicians Act. Think about what this bill will do and think about who's voting for it. First of all, it uses taxpayers' dollars to fund political campaigns. Think of all the different people who can run for office, and your taxpayer money is going to go for that campaign. Think of all those members who are going to vote. Maybe they don't like to have to talk to people and get held accountable of whether someone would want to make a contribution to their campaign that's limited, not corporate or anything else that they can provide. But no, you make a vote for this, it's an easy money. Taxpayers are going to fund your campaign. Or think about the priority that Democrats have now in this bill. It would legalize voting for convicted felons. even if you've been convicted of voter fraud. It would weaken the security of our elections and make it harder to protect against voter fraud. Think about what it does to the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission is made up of 6 members, Republican and Democrat. No, they want to put the thumb on the scale. They want to make it 5. That, to me, takes away the credibility of our elections, and more importantly, it focuses just on the candidates, focuses more so on those who are in office, helps them get taxpayer money, and the fraud and abuse that would run rampant after this bill passes. You heard briefly from Liz and from Steve Scalise talking about one central issue. This is not an issue that would have to be tough to address. It should not be difficult to address. No one in America, no one in this world should support anti-Semitism. It is growing throughout the country. We see it in different parts of the world as well. Reports have been coming back showing the growth. Congress should not be a place that it grows. Congress should be a place that sets an example. I'm proud of this conference, the way we've reacted to tough decisions recently. I would hope Democrats could react to tough decisions. I listened to the speaker. I heard the words that she said to her conference last week on how tough votes on the floor. It should not be tough to stand up against this type of talk. It was the Republicans who brought to the floor in the minority of an MTR that made a point about this type of language, that this country would not stand for it. Most importantly, this Congress would not. The Democrats now want to change how an MTR even comes forward. Again, this should not be a tough decision. I know the Democrats said they were going to stand up to it. They were going to put a resolution, but not mention any names. They didn't want to take actions in committees like this conference did when they saw something that they disagreed with, the foundation of what this country is developed upon. But now they had to pull it back. Do they not even have their own votes to pass? Because I know Republicans, we were able to put an MTR on, and we showed that we have the votes to join with them. I'm just wondering within their conference if they are willing to lead. But willing to lead not on a partisan issue, but willing to lead where everybody should easily be able to stand and take a strong issue. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Leader McCarthy, what do you make of the fact that the anti-Semitism resolution that's supposed to come to the floor tomorrow does not specifically mention Representative Omar by name?
I have not seen the resolution yet. I would think you would want to identify where the problem rests. The first resolution they proposed, I know, took a lot of the language that we had already passed on the floor. So what would the difference be? Congresswoman Omar, she apologized, and then she made some other statements. Why would it? I think it would rise to a bigger issue now. I just know in our conference, when we had an issue, we actually removed people from committee. We made a very strong point that we do not, one, accept that language, believe in that type of language, or will let that represent us. I would think the Democrats would actually stand where we did as well. Yes.
Mr. Leader, are you planning to bring up such a resolution against Congresswoman Omar, or are you just waiting to see what the Democrats do first before doing so?
I would like to see what the Democrats are going to do if they're going to lead. We've already led on this issue. When we first heard the anti-Semitic comments, our ability to bring something to the floor is limited. I know the Democrats are now trying to even limit that further, even though it's been there for 100 years. Moving an MTR, it has to be germane to the topic of what you're talking about. So we don't always have an opportunity to bring something up. This should not be a difficult issue. They have all the tools and the ability to solve this problem. The question is, will she lead and do something about it? And I'm referring to the speaker. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Leader, I was wondering if there are conversations ongoing now about raising or extending the debt limit, because we are currently operating under extraordinary measures. And I was wondering if there are active conversations going on, or if that's something that Congress feels they can deal with later when these extraordinary measures run out.
We have not had a bipartisan meeting yet, but the greatest threat to this country is our debt. This is something both parties should sit down not just talk about, but put a path to solve. Yes, sir.
Getting back to Ms. Omar, yesterday in an interview, Mr. Scalise behind you said that Ms. Omar, he had concerns that Ms. Omar was receiving security briefings. Do you believe that, based on her service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, do you believe that Ms. Omar is a national security threat?
I wouldn't go that far. What I am concerned about is that she's not only made anti-Semitic comments, but she's on the committee that has jurisdiction over our foreign policy. And if that's the direction that Speaker Pelosi thinks her conference should be taking, that's the kind of people that she's put on that committee that reflects their views on foreign policy. And so I'm very concerned about her. I don't think, frankly, that she takes the right approach to Israel. I don't think she understands the American-Israel relationship, the way it's been built over generations as a truly bipartisan relationship, and something that's in the national security interests of the United States, because many of the enemies of Israel are also the enemies of the United States. And we work together on a lot of foreign policy issues. And to question that relationship, and to question the patriotism of any member of Congress or any American who shares those same values is an insult not only to Jewish people, but to people all over the world who understand the importance of Israel as a Jewish state.
Why did you express concern about her getting these specific security briefings?
Well, it's ultimately about her views and her anti-Semitic comments. The fact that she's on the committee of jurisdiction, not only getting the briefings, but then what actions is she going to take to try to undermine our efforts to have a strong relationship with Israel. And clearly she's made it clear she doesn't believe in that relationship. So if she's going to continue to serve on that committee, that must mean Speaker Pelosi is comfortable with those kind of beliefs being represented in her conference.
Yes, sir.
What is your response to allies of Ms. Omar who say she's being unjustly targeted because she's a Muslim woman of color?
She should not be targeted based upon that. I don't believe she is. I believe Congresswoman Omar stated she questioned whether somebody could have alliance and faith to America and have a faith, be of Jewish faith and still be an American in the belief. No one should raise that question to her on her faith either. That's the point of what the argument is about. She has the right to have briefings. She's a member of Congress. The question is the anti-Semitism that's grown around the world. How do you question somebody how they can be a good American regardless of whatever religion they are? And that goes to her as well. So she should be the first one to understand what she's saying is wrong. And nobody, there was a poster put out that we denounce. I watched Lee Zeldin put something out very quickly against that too. And no, she should not have any problems in that process, and I don't believe she is. But from that same belief, she should understand what she's saying, why this is wrong, and why people are upset, why her own committee chair rebuked her and her own comments, questioning his loyalties. Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask about HR 1 and specifically if the Republican conference feels that there are areas, Congressman Davis, you mentioned, areas that you do agree with within HR 1 in the bill, do you think that there's an opportunity for a bipartisan compromise or some sort of work-together solution to move something forward on elections?
I'll take the first point of that, then I'll have Congressman Davis come up. But is there a place that we can work together? Yes. I think the first and foremost place we should work together is the harvesting of ballots. But unfortunately, all the amendments we proposed inside the only committee that they allowed to mark up when almost 40% of this bill has not been marked up, because House administration doesn't have all jurisdictions, so they couldn't take the whole bill up, was denied. But the core basis of this bill is to use taxpayer fund to fund a campaign. It also embraces and allows those taxpayers' funds, what can you use it for? Well, I'm a candidate. I could be a candidate, never intend to win the election, but I get taxpayer-funded money. I could pay for my daycare. I could pay my own salary. I could pay my own rent. I could just run for office on the taxpayer dime to make this process continue to go. There are so many frauds and problems with this bill. There's no way there's any bipartisan compromise in this bill. But if the Democrats would like to sit down and do something about harvesting of ballots, I think they'd find a very willing individual here and also a very willing committee. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Leader McCarthy. And that is a great question. Obviously, as I said, there are some things in this bill that I'm supportive of. We ought to get rid of, as Leader McCarthy said, ballot harvesting. We saw what it did to cause us to have a special election in North Carolina, where that individual may not have been charged for doing what he did if he went to a state maybe like California. The most important issue in Illinois, my home state right now, is redistricting reform. There's redistricting reform provisions in this bill that I, of course, can be supportive. But the problem is the Democrats didn't ask us Republicans for any input whatsoever. This bill was introduced on January 3rd. It was put together and bragged about at the initial press conference of being written by special interest groups, and every single Democratic member of Congress signed on as a co-sponsor of this bill. Every single Democratic member, if they support this bill, will now own the provisions that Kevin talked about, and they still have given us no indication. They accepted none of our amendments that would have made the bill better. They showed no bipartisanship whatsoever. So the onus is on them to actually come work with us. We've given them chances, but they have yet to take up any offer that we've thrown their way.
Thank you.